6:40 is the time. Well, you may have seen a load of those demonstrations by students, those sit-ins, those encampments going on in New York and in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Well, the police have been clearing those after, well, quite a lot of violence and intimidation. And after many, many weeks, well, what a surprise. Our own students have decided to be copycats. And we've seen new sit-ins and encampments in both Oxford and Cambridge universities over the last 24 hours. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Ashok Kumar, who's Associate Professor of Political Economy at Birkbeck University. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. Have they started at Birkbeck as well or not?
They haven't started at Birkbeck, but there's an encampment at SOAS right next door to Birkbeck, and there's another encampment at UCL, which is on the other side of Birkbeck.
That's it. Of course there is. Of course there would be at London universities as well. So what do you make of these protests? Because they've got a lot of demands. They're setting up their camps. The thing I find the most difficult is apparently, I think the one in Cambridge, they do actually have some arts and crafts sessions. I would find that quite difficult to cope with. They all, for some reason, all wear masks, even though they're outdoors, which I find a bit strange. Maybe you can help us with that. But what is the purpose of these protests?
Look, the universities are, like many institutions in Britain, complicit in the ongoing occupation and the genocide in Gaza. So the demands are very simple. It's like, disclosure. So disclose where the financial investments are happening in the universities, and then divest from arms companies that are, perpetrating the ongoing occupation and subjugation of Palestinians, and then also to try and break direct links. Institutions in Israel, whether it be Technion University or Tel Aviv University, conduct research that surveil and kill Palestinians. They conduct legal briefings that allow Israel to dock accountability. So they're directly responsible for what's happening in Gaza.
They're directly responsible for the genocide, which isn't a genocide, of course. It's a.
I mean, we still have a ruling on that. It certainly looks like one. We've certainly seen plenty of genocidal statements. We won't know until we get an ICJ ruling on it, but we believe it to be one, and there have been genocidal statements made by Israeli leaders, and on top of that, we already know that the ideology of the current ruling party, not even the far-right parties that prop up the ruling party, is one innately of ethnic cleansing. That's why they believe in Israel's sovereignty from the river to the sea, which necessitates ethnic cleansing because they are an ethno-state. Whereas Palestine is not an ethno-state, so would not, indeed, need to have to happen for there to be Palestine from the river to the sea. That is the key difference.
War. It's horrible that people die, but genocide has specific meaning. You'd think all these really, really clever students and professors would know the definition of what genocide is, wouldn't you?
Well, it's really weird how Julia Hartley-Brewer has now found...
I'm literally a communist.
Yes, the follow. It's very funny how Julia Hartley-Brewer has now found an occupation that she actually opposes. Weird, that.
Well, genocide is two things. It's action and intent, and I think that there's it's two things. It's action and intent.
It actually has a meaning. It actually has a meaning. Systematic murder of an ethnic group.
Yeah, well, it's been 7 months to the day, and they've killed 35,000 people.
We're up to 35,000 now.
Children.
The Hamas-run health ministry claims that is the case. How many of
them? I mean, the UN also admits it, and it's the figures that Israel and the IDF themselves use. You will see on the IDF website, every single male casualty has been listed as a terrorist killed on the IDF website officially. You can go and check it out if you want to.
Sorry, a month ago, the Pentagon put out a statement that said those numbers are accurate. The Washington Post backs that up. Human Rights Watch says that the Ministry of Health for the repeated times that Israel
there's been some analysis in terms of the numbers of believed to be women and children, whether or not actually a larger percentage are actually Hamas fighters rather than innocent civilians. Either way, one innocent civilian dying is for most of us too many. However, it's what happens in war. That's not the same as genocide. That's a different thing. Genocide is.
I mean, if you think that those things happen in war, then you'll quite easily, I'm assuming, Julia, you'll hand wave away the civilian casualties on October the 7th away in such the same fashion, won't you? If casualties of civilians just happen during wartime, then of all the October the 7th civilian casualties, you can just instantly ignore them too. Because the conflict just didn't stop. The conflict has been ongoing for the entirety of the length of the occupation, the belligerent occupation of the Palestinian territories by Israel. If your justification for civilian death is just, there's a war, who cares, then you can make that same case for the October the 7th civilian victims. You shouldn't, because it's bad on both sides, when both sides commit war crimes. When both armies in these cases, the army of Israel and the militant wing of Hamas, the Al-Qassam brigades, when they deliberately target civilians and deliberately kill civilians, that must be condemned as the war crime that it is, and the intent on ethnic cleansing must be studied by the statements made from Israeli officials that have perpetrated these crimes. It's as simple as that.
It's a specific act which quite clearly Israel, if they are committing genocide, they're doing it really badly.
Oh yeah, how many people would they have to kill, Julia, for you to commit to not defend
attempted
Israel?
genocide.
How many people would they have to murder for you to not continue to defend
murder
Israel?
and killing are different things, and you, as an associate professor of political economy, would, I'm sure, know the meaning of those two words.
Yeah, 17,000 children have been killed. Mm-hmm. How many more children would they have to kill for you to not defend Israel?
It's a population of a couple of million, isn't it? So the key thing is the intention is to oust Hamas.
No, the intention is to ethnically cleanse Palestine. Of course, it's not just, indeed, as somebody is pointing out in chat, the civilian deaths due to bombing, for example, the civilian casualties due to Israeli airstrikes. It is also the deliberate destruction of the ability for there to be any kind of infrastructure in Gaza for them to live in. It would be ethnic cleansing for them to, I don't know, pave an entire road throughout half of the Gaza Strip, thereby meaning there's no access for North Gaza for any of the Palestinians that live there, whose homes that they've destroyed deliberately, the scholasticide they've engaged in by destroying all the cultural and academic institutions of Gaza. These are all things that they have done. The Netzarim corridor explicitly precludes Gazans from going back to their homes in the north, almost like they have plans to annex this territory. Again, and by cleansing it of Arabs, because they don't want Arabs in Israel if they were to annex the state. That's why they have to ethnically cleanse it. That's why they had to ethnically cleanse it during the Nakba, to maintain the Jewish character of the state of Israel, to keep it an ethno-state under the founding principles of the actual state that it represents. And on top of that, there is the deliberate humanitarian catastrophe they are deliberately trying to cause. They've blocked Kerem Shalom, they've blocked the Rafah crossing now as well, and they've blocked the Eretz crossing too. So aid can't get in anymore, despite the fact they've been given provisional measures handed down by the ICJ under the provisions laid out because they were accused of genocide by South Africa. The provisional measures were to maximise aid coming in at all times through all crossings. Closing all other crossings is the opposite of those provisional measures handed down by the ICJ because of the case brought against them accusing them of genocide. What does it make you think, Julia, if they get accused of genocide, say, do these measures to make sure one doesn't happen, and they don't do them and in fact go back and close more crossings? Does that look like a deliberate humanitarian catastrophe to you, or does that just look like the horrors of war?
Terrorists not to kill children. If the intention was to kill children, surely they wouldn't be dropping leaflets and texting people's mobile phones saying, you need to get out of Gaza City, or in this case now Rafah, because we're going to send our troops in. If you're trying to kill those people, why would you do that?
And that's right, Jim Speak, as well. Not only because genocide also, as part of the convention, states creating conditions to bring about the destruction of the group in whole or indeed in part. And what would a humanitarian starvation capacity? Would that be the destruction of the group in whole or in part if there were starvation casualties because of the aid crossings that they've blocked, again in contravention of the ICJ's provisional measures to prevent genocide? Seems a little bit like it might be like a bit genocide-y, be a bit bad. No bueno. And so they've dropped all these leaflets to warn people. First of all, when they move to the other areas, they get bombed anyway. The area they're telling people to move from Rafah to is definitely not a safe zone, quote unquote. And on top of that, the IRA warned people ahead of engaging in bomb action. Don't try and tell me that the IRA were the most moral terrorists in the world or something by comparing them to the IDF.
They've sent them into Rafah. Then now they said this is where you'll find
safe haven. That's where Hamas is now. So now they're asking people to leave Rafah. So why would they do that if they wanted to kill those people?
Because there's people like you that can then use that as a way to say they're not meaning to do 100% a PR thing. I mean, the fact that you're perpetrating that is exactly what they want.
Well, I can only perpetrate. No, have they or haven't they dropped leaflets telling people you need to leave this part of Rafah because the IDF are coming in?
You're right. Before 9/11, all they had to do was drop leaflets on New York, and it would have made it just okay for them to attack the World Trade Center. Let's look at any number of instances.
The World Trade Center was a civilian target that wasn't harbouring terrorists who held hostages belonging to
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely not been any attacks on civilian infrastructure at all by Israel. No instances of attacks on civilian infrastructure whatsoever, apart from the deliberate destruction of the entirety of all of the universities. Literally, they laced it with bombs after knowing that it was clear and blew it up anyway. They've destroyed so much civilian infrastructure that the UN created a new term called domicide to describe the amount of civilian infrastructure deliberately destroyed by Israel. They deliberately wait until Hamas terrorists, for example, that they would call them, are in their homes with their families to bomb them, which maximizes the civilian casualties around them as well. We know this because of the expose from 9/7/2. The idea that they're trying to avoid civilian casualties is nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
Yeah, Al-Shifa wasn't harboring either. The BBC has done a massive report that says that was completely confected by Israel. Israel's been using the Hamas line over and over.
We know that the hospitals. We know that the hospitals had hostages.
Not true.
We do
That's
because some of the hostages themselves have said they were held there.
That's completely erroneous. Look at that.
Can I just say, Ashok, here's what's interesting.
I mean, to be fair, Ashok specifically mentioned Al-Shifa. I've not seen these stories about hostages saying they were held in hospitals. But Al-Shifa specifically, we know that's not true. We've seen the tunnels underneath. We know what happened. Remember the Ehud Barak interview with Christine Hermanpour? They're like, oh yeah, we thought they were going to be down there because we built the tunnels, but turns out they weren't. What we've seen footage of, 2 beds and a sink. There is a list. Come on off it, Julia.
Anything that Hamas claims, or you probably read it on social media, 100% true, don't question it, or you're genocidal. Anything that Israel says, even when there is video evidence, absolutely
What video evidence?
Well, the leafleting, for instance.
It was shown as a sham by the BBC. The BBC isn't some pro-Palestinian
I think you'll find
network.
some of the BBC verifying has been... Well, these quite a lot of BBC verifying, given that actually a lot of the sources they have used for some of their verifications are actually pro-Hamas supporters.
Oh, okay, the BBC is Hamas now, is it? The BBC now officially is Hamas. Well done, Julia. We have really jumped the shark now. What next? The Times is Hamas? Apparently the Green Party is Hamas now as well.
Hamas, Julia. Everyone's Hamas. BBC is Hamas.
Not everyone at the BBC.
Pentagon is Hamas. Human Rights Watch, Hamas.
When the BBC use people, when they use reporters who have tweeted support of Hamas, then yes.
The UN said they wanted to come in and investigate it. Israel said no, and they said Hamas.
And that's an issue.
Then people like you would come out and say, no, UN is also Hamas. Is the UN Hamas, Julia?
The UN has been extraordinarily poor at condemning Hamas. The UN Women's Organization didn't condemn the rape of women from hostages.
They said they would investigate it, and Israel said they wouldn't allow them to investigate it. Is Hamas in the room right now, Julia? I'm really concerned that you're thinking everything's Hamas.
I don't think everything's Hamas. However,
yes, you do.
I also don't take the words of murderous, raping, torturing terrorists as the gospel.
Okay, well then you won't take the information and the words of the IDF seriously, because they do all of those things too. Again, if you want to say, well, we won't believe somebody because of the things that they do and believe, which is true, Hamas do and believe bad things, terrible things, and have done atrocious war crimes, for example. If you say you won't believe anything that comes out of Gaza whatsoever because Hamas have done bad things and are bad people, then by that same logic, you would also not believe anything that the IDF says, because they do the same thing. The exact same things are done by the IDF.
Call me old-fashioned. Let's get back to these. Let's get back to these student encampments. What is the purpose of this? Because again, the BDI thing, what does it remember? Was it boycott, divestment, and sanctions? There seems to be such a concern with Israel. Now, in my day at uni, I'm quite old. The big concern at the time was about South Africa and about economic sanctions to sort of whether it's sporting sanctions and the like. Why are young people, students, why are they so obsessed with Israel, but they don't seem to have the same concern about, say, for instance, Russia or China or Assad in Syria or the.
I mean, when was the last time, Julia? I can't search your Twitter timeline because you've blocked me. When was the last time you talked about West Papua? What was the last time you talked about the Rohingya people? When was the last time you talked about Kurdistan? When was the last time you talked about Nagorno-Karabakh? I guarantee you, if I search through your media portfolio, I will find exactly 0 mentions of Kurdistan or the Nagorno-Karabakh. This is just nonsense. These students have exactly the same opinions about the occupation of West Papua, the occupation of the Nagorno-Karabakh, and the occupation of all these other areas that are under colonial occupation. We all care about the liberation of all of these areas. That you just try to pretend that we only care about Israel because it furthers your narrative, but you don't care about anything else. You hate students. You try and pretend we have views that they don't. I'm not a student person. I don't know why I said that, but you're trying to pretend that the students have views that they don't, or leftists more broadly have views that we don't, because it suits your narrative. Have you ever asked us what our opinions are about Kurdistan? Have you ever done that? When was the last time you condemned Erdogan for sending troops in to Rojava? Oh, but Assad is bad because he's not in NATO and he's an evil and he's a dictator, which is true, he is bad. But will you call out Erdogan's incursions into Kurdistan? Will you fuck? Will you fuck?
Saudis, what they've been doing in Yemen. They seem to be very specifically concerned with Israel. I wonder why that is.
Well, I wonder whether you were asking the same questions when you were a student. I'm sure you were very involved in asking for boycotts against apartheid South Africa.
I was mostly drinking.
Yes, I'm sure you were. But I'm saying that actually, our government is supporting what's happening in Israel. We're arming
them. Supporting Israel as a democratic ally, yes.
We're arming them. We're giving them diplomatic cover. We're giving them military cover. We're giving them finances. We're not doing that with Russia. We have sanctions against Russia. We're not doing that with China. We have sanctions against China. The same people that oppose what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen, 2-3 years ago, a massive famine that ran 10 years, those same protesters are the exact same ones that are protesting now.
Are they the same?
Yes,
because
they are.
Yes.
I think there might be some.
Stop the War Coalition did marches about wanting to stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia during the war in Yemen. Owen Jones, who continually gets critiqued for only caring about Israel, has done multiple articles about Saudi Arabia's manufactured humanitarian crisis in Yemen. We're the only people who talk about this. You fuckers on the right, only ever mention this stuff when you can use it to attack critics of Israel. Again, Find me. I dare anybody to find me at any point before today any mention of Julia Hartley-Brewer talking about the Nagorno-Karabakh or West Papua. Find me one moment where she's mentioned either of those things. Because you won't find it because it doesn't exist.
Our government was arming Saudi Arabia, and we oppose that. So this argument that why aren't you protesting something that our government's already doing? We're protesting the fact that our tax dollars, our government that we have elected, is continuing to support this massive violence, call it whatever you want, violence that's been perpetrated in Gaza.
But hold on a second. An awful lot of these protests were there, Asher, a lot of these protests were there, well, not this encampment, but they were actually, the BDI program, that was actually long before, the attack on Gaza as a result of the Hamas attack. Back before
the occupation's been going on for 76 years.
But they haven't been occupying Gaza.
Yes, they have. They're explicitly, legally, under international law, the belligerent occupiers of the Gaza Strip.
Yes, they have. This is recognized. I love that you have this.
They left Gaza in 2005.
No, the unilateral disengagement protocol under Ariel Sharon was just about the dismantlement of settlements. It is still an occupation of the air territory, of the blockade of the sea, the wall that encases it, the control of the population registry. That is literally an occupation under international law, just because there aren't any settlements anymore. And Ariel Sharon deliberately did that to empower Hamas to be able to derail the peace process. Ariel Sharon's disengagement was not to try and give Palestinians more freedom. It was to stop the formation of a Palestinian state by dividing Gaza from the West Bank. That's what the disengagement protocol by Ariel Sharon was about. And to try and do the fucking Hasbro propaganda about it is shameful.
Well, they did. They've enclosed it. It's a military occupation. People cannot leave, come back.
Wait a second. Why aren't you asking for a boycott of sanctions on Egypt? Egypt closed the border.
They put a restriction on everything that comes in, comes out.
Egypt
hasn't been bombing everything.
No, Egypt has engaged in an agreement with Israel. Israel are the one who controls the Rafah crossing. The reason why Israel won't let things out, and to be fair, Sisi is a cock who entirely allowed himself to get trolled by Israeli actors on this one, but the operation of the Rafah crossing is based on an agreement between Israel and Egypt. You know why it's based on an agreement between Israel and Egypt? Because Israel are the occupiers of the territory. There's no Palestinian state. They can't negotiate with Hamas because the crossing is controlled by the occupiers of the territory, which is Israel. You're admitting our point here, Julia.
3 years they've been bombing. Israel's been bombing Gaza every 3 to 4 years.
I wonder why they do that. I wonder what happens just before that.
And they call it mowing the lawn. So Israel has been doing that.
Do you think these protests in Cambridge, Oxford, and London, do you think they're going to make any difference? Will anyone listen?
All I'm going to say is, Julia, you oppose BDS because you say it's anti-Semitic or they're whatever.
No, I didn't say. No, don't put words into my mouth.
Okay, so why do you oppose BDS?
Because I support Israel, because it's a democratic, it's the only democratic state in the Middle East.
Yeah, can democracies do no wrong? Do you support America committing what? Do you support Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay just because America's an apparent democracy? That's a weak line. That's a weak line.
Oppose the marches
I don't oppose the marches. No, I haven't called them.
You think they're good?
No, I think people should. I think people got every right to march. I'll accept where they don't control, where there is hate and where there is violence, threats, and anti-Semitism. And if they can't, then they should be banned. But I've never called for them to be banned if they could be peace marches. That's fine.
So, but do you oppose the police going in and breaking up these encampments? You support free speech.
I do support free speech.
One day ago, you would have supported
if they're on private land. If they're on private land, they're asked to go. Then I'm afraid then the police have got every right to go in. But if the students, if
true, occupations are bad, aren't they, Julia? Huh? Yeah, occupations are bad, aren't they?
If they carry on and they're not intimidating students, particularly Jewish students, then if they want to carry on and sit in their tents and go to their and have their little arts and crafts sessions and wear their silly masks, they're entitled to do so.
Well, a number.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
No, you're not disappointing me. I'm very happy to hear this. A number of universities have already conceded. Goldsmiths have conceded. Queens in Ireland have conceded. A number of universities have conceded to protesters' demands, so they are being quite effective. I mean, you could.
Hey, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.